Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this special weekday tea. Our Alliance of Women Directors Teas are an opportunity to talk all things directing in film, television, and new media with industry leaders. And we're very pleased to have today with us director Jessica Hobbs. I'm Kim First from the Alliance of Women Directors, and today with me is Jessica Hobbs, who's the director of season 3 of Netflix prestige drama, The Crown, which tells the inside story of the decades-long reign of Queen Elizabeth II and the struggle between her private and public self. So the series focuses on the political rivalries between the different members of the royal family and also the great events that shaped the second half of the 20th century. We'll talk specifically about Jessica directing episodes 307, Moondust, and the finale of season 3, Cri de Coeur. Jessica, welcome.
Thank you, Kim. I'm very happy to be here.
Great. Well, we're so excited that you're here. I mean, as big fans of The Crown, as many of us are, we just have so many questions for you as a director. And I know that you and I had a little bit of a chance to chat ahead of time, but I'm just so curious, like when you came to direct The Crown, obviously you were a very successful director in Australia. And, you know, this was something that how familiar were you with The Crown, with the show? And, you know, what did you love most about the series and why did you want to be part of it?
I'd been living in the UK, I think 3 years by that stage. So I'd done a few projects here and they contacted my agent about it. She wasn't sure whether it would be right for me, but at that point I had to admit I was a huge fan. But if I'm really honest, when I first sat down to watch the show, I thought, I'm not going to like this. I was almost determined not to like it. I had a kind of churlish approach to it. And of course it started, and then John Lithgow appeared, and I thought, any show that casts John Lithgow as Churchill, I'm in. Like I was just in the first minute of the show. It was the humanity of it. It was the joy of it. It was the kind of irreverence of it. And I was so delighted. I was a huge fan. So when they came and asked me if I'd be interested, I was very interested. They're quite unique in the way they approach directors because they talk to you about the stories that they have for that season and what you might be interested in. And I grabbed these two pretty strongly, pretty early on. But Moondust, my father had trained to be a Catholic priest, and obviously I'm here, so it didn't succeed. But he'd left the seminary after 5 years. But I'd grown up with a parent who constantly struggled and questioned with the notion of faith, and I was very interested in that, and perhaps far less black and white than I used to be when I was younger, and I was very against religion and didn't believe in it. I'd gone through a whole process and actually started to explore and be interested in world interfaith movements and what they were doing for communities, and I just saw this as an opportunity to take two things that I loved, the moon landing, which I was obsessed by, and the notion of faith in a person. So that one grabbed me straight away. Also because when I read it, I just thought, this is terrifyingly difficult to transcend to screen. This is a really, really hard script to make work. And Cri de Coeur, because I'm a huge fan of Helena's, and I loved the idea. I felt that it would give me some room to do what I do, to perhaps provide a little bit of looseness and sensuality and perhaps my particularly female perspective to that. So I was very clear with them that they were the two I was most interested in.
That's fantastic. Actually, you know, I'm going to dive right in and just say that you have a particular stamp and there's some latitude. I'm just curious, you know, once obviously there's the series showrunner, Peter Morgan, and I'm obviously he must be very involved in every episode. I'm just curious, like what it's like working with him and, you know, specifically, how do you put your own stamp on what latitude does he give you?
Yeah, and it's a great question because so often you are in every project you do is a different degree of collaboration, and you always have to work out what that collaboration actually means. It's why I find those initial conversations are unbelievably important for you to say, this is how I see this piece. How do you guys see this piece? Because if you don't have a very frank conversation in that first meeting, you could end up in a very uncomfortable situation a few months down the road when you realize that you are both trying to make something that's at odds with each other. So we had those very clear conversations. I'm a massive fan. I really, really love the guy. He is brutal and brilliant. He will always tell you what he's thinking, even though sometimes you'd wish he wouldn't. But he allows you, he was genuine. He always said to me, I want what you are going to bring to this. I'm interested in what you have to say about what I'm trying to write about. And he never backed off from that. There's a lot of people who say that, but find that more difficult to follow through. He really does. It doesn't mean there's not a lot of rub. There's a lot of quite intense conversations. You really need to be able to defend your work and the decisions and the processes behind it. But equally, he is really tough on the scripts. He'll throw stuff out. If he says it doesn't, he'll go, I've really let you down here. I don't know what I was thinking. Let's revisit this. And sometimes it's a case of actually just talk to me about what you wanted it to be. And just by opening up that conversation, you'll suddenly go, okay, do you know what? Just I'll go back into the edit. I'll give you something tomorrow. Let's rethink it. And suddenly it unlocks itself. But it's been one of the great creative collaborations I've had, and I didn't expect that.
Well, as fans of the season are aware, The Crown, it's very heavily historically researched. So I'm curious, as a director, how does this play into your work? What is your research team like? How do you work with your researchers? Are they there on set? Like, what is that process like for you? And how does that inform your directing?
It's amazing. So there's about 10, I think, in the research team. There would be, I think there's 6 in the writing research, which includes 2 political specialists, and then there are 4 visual researchers. I hope I'm getting their numbers right. But they are their own department. They are the most generous, committed, fantastic team of people. And I slightly accidentally, in my very first stage of pre-production, I was given the option of working out where the studios were or in the city. And I asked where the research team were, and they were working from the city. So I started in there very early in pre. And I was sitting next to them, and it meant that I could just constantly say, hey, can I just, and they have access to all of this stuff. Plus, they're in every script meeting with Peter. So they're able to feed back into, sometimes you'll read a scene and you'll think, I feel like I'm missing something here. And they'll say, look, that came from this discussion, from this piece of history. And by being able to talk about it like that, you're like, oh, okay, how can I give that information to the audience without, having to spend 20 minutes explaining it? And they'll, you can go to them with an idea and say, I want to push this through as a kind of emotive thought. Do you think I can back this up from what you understand about the character? And that's amazing to have.
That's fantastic. Very cool. So you mentioned pre, so I just want to touch on that. So you talk about pre. I've had other directors emailing me, I'm going to speak to you, and just curious. Obviously this is television at a whole different scale. Just if for those who don't know, can you just talk a little bit about the scope and about how different this must be from directing other television and what your pre-production is like?
Yeah. So when you first start, they talk about, Peter's, at your very initial meeting with him, he said, I treat every episode as a separate film in its own right, which is very freeing because it doesn't mean you're necessarily tied into ongoing styles, ongoing story. So that really excited me. I think the thing is to understand, which I didn't initially, is it's a year for me to do 2 episodes, that gives you an idea of the scale of time that they're booking you out for. And what the complicated side of that is, I thought, wow, I'm going to have so much time. It's going to be great. You don't necessarily have that much more time. What you are doing, though, is because 10 separate films are being made with 3 or 4 different directors over over a decade, with a cast of the main cast is somewhere around 300, it's like a huge military exercise. So all of these moving pieces. So suddenly you're like, I'm going to Spain to shoot one scene. I'm going to Scotland to shoot there in the morning. And then I have to come back to London and shoot 10 years later a scene here. So your prep is so important. And they give you a lot of it, which is great. And you're incredibly well supported. But it's not that I wasn't still free on set, because it's really important to me that the actors feel that they're not completely locked down, that not everything's predetermined. But I knew, every other detail had been thought of, how I might approach it visually, with lots of scope within that. Every detail of the design, there's a whole department that handles the animals, which is great. So, and I love working with animals and water. And so they were very open to that. I wanted to do a whole lot of water work, which they were great about. And you're casting specific animals that would be right to these people at that time. So all of that. And then it's just as much as possible cribbing time with the actors so you can rehearse and talk through. It's a very, very busy and intense time, but even though a year sounds like a lot, you are paddling very hard the whole time.
Fascinating. Well, you just talked about rehearsal, so I'm curious because I know Helena Bonham Carter has recently said that you were her favorite director. So that's a big statement from someone who's done a lot of work. So I'm curious about that with rehearsal. And actually, this might be a good opportunity for us to, I'm going to just let Anlea know I'd like to play one of the clips.
Sure.
Maybe we could play the clip from the final episode, the Roddy party clip. And I'm curious to talk about rehearsal and your process and your choices with this, because this is a very dynamic scene and it seems like maybe a little departure stylistically from some of the rest of the work. So I want to hear about your process with it.
Perfect.
She goes. She's playing all night. Yeah, the music's alright. Mama's got a squeeze for head and never sleeps at night.
Solo or duet?
I'm just a girl, a wonderful girl. I'm the sweetest one in town. You can search for miles around, but not one like me can be found.
You've got a smile, a wonderful smile, and a certain little way.
And every time the boys get near me, they look at me and say, Red hot mama, you're the one we need. Red hot mama, sun charmer, yes indeed. They say that I should be in the follies, tamales. I have a pair of eyes, just like old Svengalis.
I confess that you possess the sweetest charms in town. And unless I miss my guess, the boys all follow you around.
Make a music master drop his fiddle, make a bald-headed man fart air in the middle. Red hot mama,
Red hot mama.
I have to tell my dad, Mom.
Hey, red hot mama, you're the one we need.
Red hot mama, sun charmer, yes indeed.
Such a fabulous scene. So I just remember watching this and being like, this is something complete. This entire episode, I just felt was, from the first moment where you took that shot of the top of the building that Margaret lives in, I just remember thinking, I have never seen that angle on the top of this building. And what an exciting choice. So I'm curious to have you speak to this scene and your process with it and how you came to these choices and decisions.
I love that you noticed that shot of the building at the top. That really makes me pretty happy because you are,
Loved it.
Well, the episode is about what it's like to live in such an observed, situation, which is what it is so difficult for Margaret. You know, she just wants to. She wants to be loved. She wants to have some fun. She wants to be free. So that's a series of scenes, really, shot over several different locations, all held together by the song, which we knew, which was in the script. Harry, who plays Roddy, who was so beautiful. I mean, he even kind of took half his clothes off on the audition. He was so keen to do the role. And interestingly, Helen was very interested in another actor who she felt really safe with. But Harry had a dangerous quality and a vulnerability about him, which she really started to recognise the more we worked. And they were just brilliant. They worked so hard on that song. I mean, she can play the piano and she's very musical and she can really sing. Doing that on set is not an easy thing at all. And doing it while performing and pretending to have fun and yelling stuff out to each other. And I loved him because he helped with all the moves and the choreography, and he was just prepared to put himself out there. And the two of them had also gone and met the real Roddy, who had burst into tears when he started talking about Margaret again. So the three of us knew we were dealing with something that was very... had been incredibly precious to those two people. And I just wanted it to reflect that raw, loose fun, you know, when you're first being enticed by somebody like that, the pure joy of it. And that's what I was trying to infuse the sequence with. And I was really aware, Peter and I talked about it a lot, we were moving into the 70s, and I wanted to shake it up. I loved the classicism and the central framing and the really careful focus pulls, but it's not so much in my wheelhouse. And I just wanted to reflect what I felt Margaret was. And she's this bomb in the middle of the family. She's this great free-ranging anarchist, which they really need. And so that's where the visuals came out of it, was what that was. And we've, you know, hopefully we've all had those moments of great romance in our life, and I wanted to reflect that, where it just is so much fun and so just about the magic between the two of you, regardless of people being around, you know. So that was how that works.
It was phenomenal. And then, of course, it leads to this unbelievable scene at the end of, I mean, this is a total spoiler if anyone hasn't seen all of season 3, but I mean, you did direct the final episode of season 3, which is probably a bit of pressure and a big deal to do the final. Is there something different about doing a final episode? And
yes, there is. I mean, often you get the gift of, you get some great endings, and I find endings easier than beginnings. Beginnings are really a delicate, and you haven't quite got the audience with you, and you're introducing a whole lot of characters. With the end, you get these huge emotional payoffs. So, you know, and people have invested 10 hours of their time. So it's a great, you know, it's always a good one to choose, I think.
Speaking of huge emotional payoffs, I would like to show the other clip that we have from season 3, which for me is probably the most emotional scene for all 3 seasons.
Hello, you. Hello, you.
Am I going to get a ticking off?
That hadn't been my intention, though perhaps I should.
Why?
Because for a while there, it was touch and go.
So I hear.
Did you mean it?
I don't know. Possibly.
How do you feel now?
Tired. A bit sore. There were tubes. A little bit foolish.
Where's Roddy?
Gone.
Where?
Run for the hills. I hear Moroccan hills.
And Tony?
Back for the thing. Future Lady Snowdon, I would wager. I'm not very good at it.
What?
The men seem to drive them all mad. Tony and I are going to separate,
Yes, I think that's probably wise.
which I'm afraid to say will lead to divorce.
Yes.
The first royal divorce since Henry VIII and Anne of Cleves.
I have a little bit of good news in that department.
Which is?
If we time it right, the announcement of your separation might get lost in the Prime Minister's resignation.
I thought he only just got re-elected. Or did I really miss something?
Due to ill health. Alzheimer's.
Sorry. How many does that make it?
Prime Minister's? Whoever replaces him will be my 7th.
The rest of us drop like flies. But she goes on and on.
For the record, I think there are many things you're good at.
Name one that's actually meaningful.
Being a sister.
No need to humour me.
I'm not. Of all the people everywhere, you are the closest and most important to me. And if by doing this, you wanted to let me imagine for 1 minute what life would be like without you, you succeeded. It would be unbearable.
Then we must both carry on.
Unbelievable. I mean, it's so beautiful the way you are, both episodes that you directed, you have these characters dealing with these deep internal battles, like, Philip with the moon dust, and then in this one, this beautiful scene between these two actresses. So what is your approach to bring this kind of depth and humanity to these scenes? I mean, obviously Olivia Colman, phenomenal actress, Helena Bonham Carter, these two phenomenal actresses, but how do you support them in this work? What is your process for that? And as far as Helena saying that you're her favorite director, to what would you attribute that?
Thank you, firstly. That's lovely what you're saying about it. And I've already got the enormous support before I start working on that scene of what's on the page. I mean, it's a beautifully written scene. There is space for emotion. There is space for understanding the unsaid, and then there are things that need to be said. And I think that I always knew it would work. Interestingly, it wasn't in the first draft. Peter was like, oh my God, what am I doing? I have to do something between Margaret and the Queen. At a table read we were doing, I was like, yes, you do. And some of his greatest scenes have come from those reads. What I try and do is work with each actor as most useful to them. Helena does an enormous amount of research and has so much work and is so prepared. But a big part of what I try and do with her is allow her or make her feel safe enough to forget about all of that, to trust that she's done that, and then to be free on set. Olivia is, she is one of those rare beings that just plugs straight into an audience. For her, it's really simple. she wouldn't understand how difficult other people would find it. She's just like, well, you're just, because that's her gift. You know, she has this pure ability to know exactly how to pitch, where to be, what it is. And the guidance for that she and I have between each other is always about clarifying what the emotive heart of the scene is, what she's trying to do. We talk about that, not in too much detail, and really making sure we don't rehearse, because rehearsal, I just wouldn't have got that if we'd been rehearsing. That would have been in the rehearsal time. There's nothing worse than being on set and not having cameras rolling and going, oh my God. You know, I was brought up on film, and you know, the kind of spectre of ratio. And suddenly, even though I struggled with digital initially because I really struggled with the change in look, over the years it's become such a beautiful form, and I've really re-fallen in love with it, and I understand it much better. But one of the great gifts of it is you can just roll. And so, and I'm very clear with the crews that I work with, and very clear with the DPs, which is, we're not going to rehearse this. This is going to happen right off the bat. And what I do talk to the actors about is everyone reaches pitches at different places. If they come out on set and I can see they're absolutely ready to go, I'm like, okay, just leave that wide shot. We'll come back to that. I want to get in here. I want to get in where I know I want to sit the weight of the scene visually. So I'll pitch that. Other actors I know need more of a run up. So I'll be like, let's just start with this and let them in, and they'll gradually feel safe enough to come out of their shells and into that more vulnerable space. I would say actors of this caliber and also of this maturity, they have lived their lives. They understand what it is. They don't necessarily understand what it is to be the Queen and her sister Margaret, but they understand what it is to be women of a certain age who have carried a weight, who have intense sibling relationships, particularly female, you know, with a sister. And so that informs so much of what we talked about and what we did. I try not, once we're in there, I try not discuss it too much. I just want to make sure we're capturing it. But I will guide and give notes as we go through if we want to shape. And the rest of it was also talking to, I mean, a beautiful Brazilian director of photography, Adriano Goldman, who I just love. Before every scene, and it's exactly what I need, and it's always the way I talk to cinematographers anyway, which is, what's it about? And I'm like, it's about this. It's about these two sisters who have this weight of the world outside that door, but this one just tried to take her life, and the other one needs to let her know why she couldn't cope with it. That's it. That's the baseline of what we're doing. He's like, great, you know, and then suddenly everything gets turned off and two things get turned on, and we talk about the mood and what it is and her fear of going back out towards the light again. And so he's able to inform all of that. For me, the more of that emotional, dramatic discussion you're able to have, the more your creative team can feed into what they're doing. You know, and I have this really strong principled belief that everybody is on a film set because they are in love with the medium. Some of them might have forgotten that they love the medium and need to be reminded, but they got into it because they love it. And so your job as a director is to bring that love for the medium back out in them so they can contribute into something that you are all telling together, and to communicate to them what you believe the story is that you're telling, as well as being open to what they can contribute to it.
Fascinating. I mean, so you start tight. You just, with these kinds of actors, you're like, let's get it down. It's not, don't ease into this. They don't need a warm up. You just get right in there.
I'll always give them the option. I'll say, look, you know, and Olivia's like, get in. You know, not that she ever runs out, but she is completely in the moment. That is her gift. She is able to be utterly present in any given moment, in life and on screen. There is no difference for her.
Wow.
And that's often what most actors are trying to reach for. Helena is able to be profoundly vulnerable in a way that I find incredibly moving, and she's utterly fearless in letting that level of exposure. You know, she's like, this is how I don't want to look good. She's staunch with makeup and hair. I have just tried to kill myself. I am in my bedroom. This is not a time for me to look beautiful. Walk away. You know, she's really great, which is what I'd been angling for anyway. But you need the actor to be on board with that. You need them to be comfortable and engaged with those choices that you're making about how they are going to look and what it is. Even to the color, we have this amazing costume designer, Amy Roberts. She and I both, I think, overuse the word bruising too often to describe Margaret's costumes. But that is the palette that we're often working in for her, because she is bruised and she is open and she is raw. So all of those choices of color, the way things come together, the kind of care of the art department of what's around. I remember my script supervisor, who's Italian, who was so wonderful. She just said, I just had this thought. Do you think she wouldn't have the phone on? I was like, oh, you're right. That's brilliant. So we took the phone off the hook, which made sense. And all those things that people can contribute to, all those little details, which as a viewer, you may not see all of it, but it all infuses into your experience of it.
That's terrific, because that was another question I had, which was how you work with all the different people on your team, the different departments. And you talked about, you know, as far as the lights, and you talk about what it is that you're trying to communicate, and then suddenly the lights start to come on, or, you know, as far as, I mean, the unbelievable scope of what you're dealing with the locations and the costumes and all of that.
Yeah.
Maybe, you know, it may be a follow-on question. I wonder, is that, you know, I wonder what is some of the hardest things about working on this kind of scope? Obviously you talked about shooting all the episodes and how it's like a military operation and all that, but just on a daily basis in your team and when you come to set and everything, how, you know, what distinguishes that kind of a day from a day on any other, you know, set, and how you work with your team? And
yeah, I think one of the things that really distinguishes it for me on The Crown is that we're portraying real people so much of the time, and I'm very conscious of what that might be like for them if they're still alive, or for their families. And again, for me, it's thinking about the emotional responsibility of what you're doing. You're not trying to, we talked a lot about this with the actors, we're not trying to do an impression of. It's a quality. It's a quality that the person has mixed with the great qualities that the actor has, and which of their qualities you want to point up. I think with The Crown, sometimes, I mean, what was brilliant was that anything I could conceive of, they would make happen. So I could go to the designer and say, I just had this idea about what was it like to not be the one who was on the moon, to be the astronaut who was on the other side, and the dark side. And he was like, you want me to build you Columbia? I was like, yes, I do. Can we just have the interior? And it didn't make it into the cut, but the fact that they built it and we shot it, and it was, that's what I loved about the show. You could try, you know, they were remarkably generous in that way. The tougher end of it was sometimes you would be in a location and you might be sharing your day with 3 other directors, and that's something I'm not great at. I don't like it. You know, I will always angle for not sharing a day if possible, or moving a scene somewhere else that I'm shooting so I don't have to. I find that very difficult. That not because of the other directors, it's just an odd gear change. It makes it. It's, you know, it's, you need to kind of own your days. You know, it's your responsibility to make them, but in doing so, I'm constantly calculating in my head. I came up through assistant directing. Okay, this has taken us more time, but I know I can simplify that. And you try to, you know, you've got your first, and you're constantly making sure they're in your line of vision all the time, going, I'm like, I know, but I'm going to surprise you soon, and you're going to see that last scene. It's going to be fine. I'm going to do it in one shot, and it's great. And they also do a very great thing on The Crown where the first assistants are producers, so that you have in one person who is your right-hand person, someone who is capable of helping you make those big money decisions when time is tight. And I thought that was a very, very good thing. So you're not having someone who's working with you and then having to go off and make phone calls or go off into huddles. It's in the same person, and I found that really good. And they were so creatively engaged in what we were doing. Doesn't mean that there weren't days, you know, the sun still sets or things don't you know, work out right. We had a day when we were shooting, our first day shooting on it was a water skiing sequence. And Harry had learned how to water ski. He was skiing on period water skis. We'd gone out the day before. We'd done a dummy run. It was great. We came to the day shooting. It was appalling. Like, it was grey, rainy, high seas. Somehow the first ended up on a different boat to me because the boat I was on was so small it could only hold the actor and the cinematographer and I. It was just like, this is not working. We're in the middle of the Atlantic on my first day on The Crown, and it's a total disaster. And I love the first assistant. We did get some stuff, and it made it in, and it was great. And he just said to me, and it will never be as bad as that again. And I was like, you promising me? And he said, yeah, I promise. It was great. I mean, both boats that we had broke down. First the camera boat, the actual character boat. Secondly, the camera boat. Everyone was speaking in different languages. I suddenly discovered my script supervisor, who was just beautiful, who's Italian, could speak fluent Spanish, which was brilliant, because I was like, I can't have this conversation because I don't know what's going on. So yeah, there are those things. And I thought, why is this happening? I thought I was going to be on this brilliant thing where everything I needed would suddenly appear. And it did. But it doesn't mean that those physical challenges aren't always there. You are always up against time.
And that was the next question I was going to ask, because I know everyone comes to directing from different paths. There's no one path to becoming a successful director, but obviously you came up, some of your early career was spent as an assistant director. And my question was going to be, you know, how do you feel that prepared you? And I think you kind of answered the question there, which is that sounds like everything is always, you know, you're managing so much. But as far as your foundation and coming to The Crown and being prepared for it, can you speak a little bit about your background, you know, as a director and coming up?
So I started, I was determined. I don't think I even really knew what a director was. I grew up in a theatre family, but I loved film, loved it. And I remember watching a film when I was about 14 and thinking, not quite understanding, but thinking someone creates that world. What is that? Who is that person who's not the film itself? I never wanted, and a lot of my family were actors. I just didn't want to do that. That wasn't for me. But I could see that there was this role that you could have where you created this world. And New Zealand at that time had a dearth, not that it's changed, of women in certain positions, and particularly assistant directors. There was assistant directors, cinematography, and editing. They were the three choices you could go for. And at that stage, if you could get a producer to agree, they would pay you the same amount as being on the dole, which meant I was like, okay, I can just live on that amount of money. I think I was 20. And managed to talk a producer into employing me. And I chose assistant directing because I wanted to be in the nub of the set. At that stage, and I was fairly practical about this, cinematography was so male-dominated that I just thought, it's going to take me years. And it was really hierarchical and a long road. And I knew what I wanted to do. So I took a punt and chose assistant directing. I loved it. For a long time, I think it took me a while to give credit to how much I learned doing that job. I thought, I'm not directing, and I'm not learning the right things, and I'm learning producerial things. But I got to work with so many different directors. They taught me so much. I was standing by their side. I watched their process. I watched them under pressure. I watched them prepare. They would talk to me about why they wanted to shoot a scene a different way in order to get the time that I would then need to allow on the schedule. And what it then fed into me when I started directing was that I understood how the days worked. I understood what everybody else did on set. And so that was good for me as a communicator. But my very first experience, Kim, I got a job on a show called Heartbreak High, and I'd been a first, and the producer, I hadn't gotten to film school for the second time. And I was like, oh my God, my life is over. So I was in the tea room of the place we were shooting, and the producer came in. It was a lovely a gay man who used to work in musicals, and he'd set up this great show. And I just blurted out, I meant to tell you I'm a director. And he said, oh, have you got anything you can show me? And I said, yeah, I've made some short films, and I'd made a 1 hour for television in New Zealand. He was like, okay, I'll take a look at them, and if they're any good, and we might give you something. I was like, oh, He walked out and I thought, why didn't I do that before?
Wow.
Anyway, he came back and he gave me brilliant advice. He said, I'm going to give you a block. You can get, I was 26 years old. I'm going to give you 2 episodes. Here's what I want you to do. I really, really don't care how good it looks. If you tell a good story, I'll give you another block. That's it.
Wow.
That's the one thing I need you to do. I could not have been given a better piece of advice at that age. He just pointed my focus in the right direction. It sounds obvious. It's, that is your role. But I think when you're coming up, you can get very distracted by all the other things you're supposed to know. And he just went, do that one. And it gave me 2 years on that show, which was great. And now I find I can very quickly, I make very good friends with my firsts, and I'm able to protect time. I'm able to guide us towards locations that I think will work for us both visually, but aren't going to necessarily hold us back. And also I know where I can push. I feel confident sitting in rooms where we're talking about the spend and what's going on, all of these things of which you have to take responsibility for as a director. So now I'm very grateful that that was my path.
And that's absolutely fantastic. No, but as directors, that's what we want to hear. I mean, again, Jessica Hobbs, it's so wonderful to have you with us here today. We're almost out of time. I know that we've got 10 more minutes, and I'm going to ask Analea. I saw a couple of questions pop up, but I cannot see.
Sure, I'll read them for you. So we have a
Q&A.
question. Yeah, we have a question from Olivia, who wanted to know, how do you let scenes breathe without throwing off the pacing?
That's a great question. I would refer to it as, it's an instinctual muscle. You learn how to feel and how to read. On a set, what you have to understand is that you are the primary audience. Everybody else is there for something other, and you are there to be the audience. So when you call action, or whoever calls action, and the performance starts, sit in it, watch it as if you're watching something unfold. Don't think about what the scene's trying to achieve. Just feel it. Feel the rhythm of the scene. You will start to then realize it just feels very pushed, or I'm not really understanding right. I wanted to feel something and I'm not. And then you can go through the secondary thinking of what those notes might be. I just try and be absolutely present when the actual scene is, when the take is happening in front of me. I will have gone through in rehearsal. Sometimes I'll have marked it out in my script. I can see where possibilities of breath and spacing are, but I'm also wanting the actors to find that themselves. If they are just doing my version of it, I'm just going to end up with 10 versions of myself. That's not nearly as interesting as what they can bring to it. But I always know that within a scene, even if I'm not going to be absolutely specific about where those breaths are, where the pitch and the role of it is, if that makes sense.
That makes absolute sense. Great question, Olivia. Was there another question from the members that you wanted to throw out there?
Here's one more from Sabrina. This is specific to the Moondust episode and Prince Philip. So much of it is his internal thinking, his internal process, his internal life. So how did you go about externalizing Prince Philip's train of thought during the Moondust episode?
It was really hard. Basically, I did a lot of different things to externalize it. And Tobias and I talked a lot. We just found any moment we could. Like there's a tiny moment before he walks in to see the astronauts. And that scene was so key, where he was just walking in. I said, hang on. Aren't you excited? And he said, yeah. And I said, okay, I just want to get the shot. So we pulled back from, rather than jumping into the room, we shot the moment before that. So for me, it's always the moments before they enter the room, the moment after they come out of the room. It's the private moments that we can give an audience that allow the work to give you that transcendent experience. You feel like you're plugged into what someone's experiencing. So I always look for those directorially, and I always try and feed those into the actor. And he was like, oh, great. Okay. So that kind of opened up, and it was interesting. That scene was very challenging, and I think he is absolutely brilliant in it. One of the reasons it's so challenging is it's because it's about vulnerability and exposure of self. He feels stupid, and he feels he's misjudged. he's put these men on a pedestal and asked something of them that perhaps isn't his place to ask.
It's such a great scene. I mean, when the astronauts are sitting there and he's facing them, and there's so much vulnerability, and you don't really see that from Philip. You know, you really see him. I mean, what you did with him in that episode was amazing. And it was just so great, the astronauts, because, you know, the fact that you built Michael Collins' space capsule, I'm still like, my mind is still blown on that. But the fact that you had the astronauts there, okay, but it's just fabulous. Just, you know, that you had them there and that they were able, the reversal where you switched it and you saw him giddy to see them. And then you saw where he was taking the loss of it and then it switched around. And they were just giddy to ask about how many rooms in your house, basically. And, you know, the simple questions. And it was very beautifully done. And that they all had colds. That was such the way you had that play out.
That was brilliant. He was like, it was interesting because Peter was like, you know, he was a bit like Philip. He said, you know, they're such a disappointment. And I thought, I don't know that they are necessarily a disappointment. I can see why they're a disappointment to him, but equally, why is it on their heads to share this unique experience that they had? Everybody in the world wanted a piece of them, and I really felt for them. And so I talked to them, you know. One of the things I try and do is I talk to actors privately so that we can have a conversation about what's going on with their character, rather than so they can then perform in a way that is surprising and new to the other actor. If you're doing it completely in front of everybody all the time, you know, we all pick up things, and so we're trying to prepare. You don't want the other actor to be prepared. You want them to be surprised and engaged. So that was one of the things, keeping those two groups apart from each other. And also, I just thought I felt how odd it would have been for them to be placed in that situation. That's where it all comes from, is just finding those moments of exposure, and that was the difficulty in the challenge of the script. Was you start off with this kind of adventurous story of, you know, for a start, I was thinking, okay, everyone knows the moon landing succeeded. we're ahead of the story here, and this is the big challenge with telling historical dramas. But what don't we know? And what I wanted to reflect was, but at the time, no one did know they were going to succeed. So how do we build tension into it? And we've just got these television screens. Okay, maybe we can go full screen. Maybe there's stuff we can do. And, you know, part of those research teams is you also have a visual archive specialist who is absolutely brilliant. She was like, oh no, NASA's amazing. And then she started feeding stuff to me. I'm like, okay, great. Which is where the Michael Collins idea came from, because there's footage of him on the other side waiting, but also what is brilliant is there's a sound bite that they have. I think it might have ended up in Apollo 11, which I didn't see till after this. It was made at a different time. But he talks about, they're saying to him what it's like when they're walking on the moon. And he says, are the pictures good? Can everyone see okay? He's more concerned with how everybody else on Earth, they're having the experience. And I just thought that was such an extraordinarily generous act.
Yeah, I mean, the writing and directing in that scene is amazing, and I just loved. I know so much about it, but just the visual of them sitting there sneezing, especially in this world of COVID that we're in, it just was like, I just felt for Philip, because he's so awkward, and these guys are sneezing. They've been to the moon, you know. It was great. It was just so unique and different, and such a different angle on that very historic event that I never thought of. And I couldn't even imagine someone would show me something about that event that I hadn't thought of or heard of. So anyhow, Jessica, our time is almost up. Our conversation has been a total delight. I don't think we have time for any other questions, but we really are honored that you came here to visit with us at Alliance Women Directors, and congratulations on your work on such a prestige show. You know, I have to say, for everybody who's watching, if you are not aware, season 3 is obviously available on Netflix. You should go watch it. And, you know, thank you everyone for joining us. And Jessica, it's just been a complete delight. Thank you for being so generous with your answers and for coming here with us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. It's lovely to be here. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. And join us for another specialty in the future. And take care.